What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined as always by Daniel Starkand. Dodgers win 8-6. They get win number 104. That is tied for the second most wins in Los Angeles Dodgers franchise history, just to put things in context. Lots to talk about. Clayton Kershaw injury, arguably the headline. You could go with 2 Trey Turner home runs, including a grand slam. You could go with Matt Beatty pinch hit, go-ahead home run late in the game. The team's second 4-run comeback in a few days. Lots to talk about here, Daniel, but the Giants win. Dodgers are 2 games back. Where would you start when thinking about this one?
I'm probably just going to start at 104 wins because that's a lot of freaking wins. Like this season, it feels like the Dodgers have never really been clicking on all cylinders. They've had injuries here, injuries there. The bats have struggled lately. Pitching has struggled, but 104 wins is just incredible. They have a chance to get to 106, and their season's going to come down to one game because the Giants just won't stop winning. So it's frustrating, but at the same time, I can appreciate, what we're seeing. And I think, honestly, right now, the way the Dodgers are playing, it's the best they've been playing in a while. The bats have now been out to play for a few games in a row now, so that's definitely been encouraging. You mentioned the Trey Turner 2 homers, the grand slam. He's been absolutely on fire. And then Matt Beatty coming up clutch with the game winner. So a fun night all around outside of the Clayton Kershaw injury, which you said, is arguably the biggest headline because the way it's looking, he might not pitch again this season. And of course, he's a free agent this winter. So there's a non-zero chance tonight was the last time he pitched in a Dodger uniform. I think both of us hope that's not the case. I'd say if we both had to take a guess, I'd say we both don't think that's the case. I think they'll get a deal done and he'll be back next year. But it's hard not to think about on a night like tonight when, he walks off the mound with the forearm injury. And obviously that's not a non-issue.
Yeah.
Like that's what he just dealt with. So it's not looking good there. But outside of that, it was a fun night.
Yeah, you say non-zero. I did tweet 0% chance that's the last pitch he throws to the Dodgers. So we'll talk about in a bit. Let's dive into this game first because there is a lot to get to. It's a fascinating game because the Dodgers jump out to a lead. Trey Turner home run to right field. Dodgers are up 1-0 in the bottom of the first. Kershaw on the mound. He gets through the first inning, no problems. The second is where things start to get dicey. The Brewers put 3 runs on the board in the second, 2 more runs on the board in the third. Kershaw, as you said, nothing appeared to be wrong. I mean, as far as anybody could tell, there was no indication something was wrong, but Dave Roberts saw something. The trainer saw something. They come out, they get Kershaw after just 2 1/3, I believe, in this one. The Dodgers go down 5-1, and this is a situation where we're texting and saying, good Lord, another one of these games. We're doing the post game. The game's taking forever. It's 5-1. Like, what are we going to do? Well, the Dodgers storm back in the 5th. They load the bases after a Barnes single, a Pujols single, a Betts walk, and all of a sudden the bases are loaded for Trey Turner, and Trey Turner hits a grand slam to tie this game at 5. Matt Beatty pinch hit go-ahead home run in the 7th. They then were to tack on 2 more runs to go up 8-5 in the 7th. Joe Kelly gives up a run in the 8th. Kenley Jansen 4-out save for the Dodgers there. But the Dodgers win 8-6, and one of the headlines here has got to be the Dodger offense. Again, we're going to get into Kershaw. We're going to get into the specifics of that. But, I mean, this was an offense that could not score for the longest time. Kershaw, by the way, 1 2/3. Gratterall was credited for those last 2 runs in the 3rd inning. So 1 2/3 for Kershaw, and then Gratterall comes in after him. But this is a team that was struggling to score runs. They get 8 runs for, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd time in the week. The offense, we've talked about this before, but if there's one encouraging thing on this one, it's got to be the Dodger offense continuing to produce. Mookie Betts has a hit. Seager, Turner, Muncy all have hits. Half those guys score runs or knock a run in. Good things for the offense. In a stretch where when you come down to a 1-game playoff, knowing the offense might be able to get you 5 or 6 runs feels pretty good.
Yeah, and they're facing a guy in Eric Lauer who's not only pitched well this season, but has historically kind of owned the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Like he was an average to below average pitcher for a while on the Padres, but was still finding a way to own the Dodgers. So that was good to see. And the Brewers are a team that, the Dodgers could see down the line, and Eric Lauer's their 4th starter. So it's good to see them kind of get that monkey off their back. But yeah, you said it. This offense, for the first time in a while, really seems to be kind of firing on all cylinders. And the scary thing is, like, they could still get even better. Like, I know there's guys like Corey Seager, Trey Turner, AJ Pollock. Those are the three guys that come to mind that are just red hot right now. But they still got more guys who haven't really heated up yet that still definitely could at any point. So, and your boy Will Smith wasn't even in the lineup today. I know you had to get one last complaint in on Twitter about that.
I hope it's the last
Hopefully,
complaint. I hope it's the
yeah,
last complaint.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully, for sure. But yeah, it was fun to watch the offense, get going. For a second there, they had the bases loaded and one out in that fifth inning, and Seager pops up, and you start to say, like, oh God, here we go again. We're about to leave all these guys on base, and then Trey just drills one into the gap over the fence. So that was fun. And honestly, I haven't felt this good about the Dodger offense probably all year, probably, at least since like the All-Star break or so. So it's definitely encouraging. It makes me feel better about that one game playoff, like you said, when at least you could not count on the offense to come through, but you feel more confident that they're gonna.
Yeah, absolutely. The fifth inning, as you said, the big one there, Austin Barnes, Albert Pujols single, Mookie Betts singles. And then, as you say, Corey Seager comes up. That's the guy you want up in that spot.
Yeah.
Infield pop-up. You're like, good Lord, you've got to be kidding me. And then Trey Turner smashes like the second pitch he sees to left center field. Just to clear something up, there's some comments here about me and Austin Barnes. Do I have to give Austin Barnes credit for, quote, starting that rally in which Trey Turner hits a grand slam? Daniel, I'll let you be the judge on this one.
Hey, October Barnes is ready to go, is what it looks like. He always comes through when it matters most. You see him starting rallies, whether it's against Blake Snell or against Eric Lauer tonight. I think he deserves a little credit. I'm with you, like, on this side of the argument, so I'm not gonna sit here and pile on you or anything. But you could get a little credit every now and then.
Aeronetic says Barnes is the greatest catcher who ever lived. So there you go.
Wow.
That's what we got in the chat. That's what we got. I loved the person saying like Will Smith was 1 for his last 15, and all I had to do was Google what did Austin Barnes do in the last 3-4 weeks, and it's like, oh, marginally better in just like an average stretch of his career. But big inning there. The seventh inning was kind of the turning point. Matt Beatty comes in, pinch hit, home run. Again, this is a guy that you and I have discussed a lot. He's a guy that when the Cody Bellinger, Chris Taylor struggles were at their peak, which I'm not saying we've left the peak, but Matt Beatty was a guy that we looked at and said, okay, at least he can give you competent at-bats. At least he can hit at a league average level. That's all we were looking for. He has been above average as far as weighted runs created plus this season. He comes in, pinch hit, home run, his first pinch hit home run of the season, his biggest hit, obviously, since coming back a few weeks ago. Talk about what that could mean for Beatty and for the Dodger bench. I mean, we mapped out how many guys are they going to take on the bench. It feels like there is a spot there up for grabs, and I can't imagine after a hit like that Matt Beatty isn't grabbing that spot.
Yeah, I definitely think he's going to get a spot. And we talked about this on a recent show, kind of, but I think what we saw tonight was kind of the role he's going to fill, right? Like, he's not there for his defense at all. But if there's a pinch hit at bat to be had against the right-handed pitcher, like Pujols was already used against the lefty, which that's kind of his role. And I don't know, you don't really trust Bellinger in that spot right now. He's your other left-handed option off the bench. But I think what we saw tonight was perfect. Like a righty's in there, big spot, put in Beatty. Obviously we're not going to expect a home run every time, but like you said, he puts together a competent at bat. And then what that also does is that leaves you Bellinger still on your bench, so that in a game like tonight where you take the lead late, you could bring him in as a defensive replacement, put him in center, move Taylor or whoever else over to left, take AJ Pollock out, who's not as good of a defender. Gavin Lux, if he's playing, you could take him out because he doesn't have a ton of experience in the outfield. But just having Beatty as that lefty bat off the bench just allows you to do that. So I definitely think he's pretty much locked up a roster spot at this point. And it was good to see him hit that homer, and I can't remember the last time he hit a homer. So that must have felt good, and hopefully he could kind of just build off of it.
Absolutely. I mean, anytime the offense can put together 8 runs, obviously they scraped together a couple more after the Beatty home run, was a good sign. And just one other guy to mention, I've been hard on Chris Taylor. I actually thought Chris Taylor looked pretty good at the plate tonight. He walks in his first at-bat. His second at-bat, which is actually the 5th inning right before that rally, he hits a ball almost 103 miles an hour that off the bat looked like it was gone and somehow comes up short. That was after crushing a foul ball just a couple pitches before that. So 0 for 3 with a walk is not what you want to see from Chris Taylor, but at least the at-bat quality seemed to improve, which something to monitor there. Of course, Cody Bellinger, if you want to go down the optimistic route, he had another infield hit, but take it for what it's worth. We'll take anything
Stole a
that
base.
to stole a base. Again, the ball was dropped, so not sure if he would have been safe, but he benefits twice there. Let's move on. We're going to get to Kershaw. Again, I think that's the headline, but let me say one more thing about this game. We're going to talk about players of the game. One guy I want to give a shout out that I feel like deserves credit is Andrew Friedman and the Dodgers scouting staff, because when you look at the Dodgers bullpen tonight, they did an excellent job. Now, Brusdar Graterol was terrible. He was the first guy to come in. It felt like Graterol's just the guy that it's almost like we don't care if we blow out his arm. Like he's just going to pitch every single day. I know he threw one pitch yesterday. He comes into the second, gets one pitch, one out, and I'm like, okay, perfect. Now they're going to go to a real reliever. They bring him back out. He's terrible. 3 hits, 2 earned runs, and then finally he comes out. But then after him, Alex Vesia, a trade acquisition from Friedman, 1 2/3, no hits, no runs, no walks, 3 strikeouts. Evan Phillips, waiver wire guy, 1 inning, 1 hit, no walks, no runs, 2 strikeouts. Justin Brule, a perfect inning for himself. And then obviously you get into the big guns, Treinen, Kelly, and Jansen, who close it out the last 3 innings. Kelly does give up a run, but besides that, just 2 hits and a walk between the 3 of them. So a big moment there because, I mean, obviously it's a 4-run game, and we're here talking about a Dodgers win, but that's only possible because of what Vesia could come in and do and get 5 outs. Phillips, Brule, and then the like after that. So we don't have to dwell on that, but I do think it's worth mentioning those guys because to get 3.2 of 1-hit baseball from those guys in the middle innings is what allowed this game to sort of stay within striking distance. And then Trey Turner obviously does what he does. So let's get to the storyline. Clayton Kershaw. Our Matt Moreno tweeted a quote from Dave Roberts, said he could tell that Kershaw was in some pain. He went out there after a few more pitches. Dodgers will have tests done tomorrow, but considering the timing, Roberts isn't too optimistic. The too optimistic part was the quote there, according to Matt. So not great stuff there from Kershaw. Obviously, you said, I mean, it's hard to imagine this isn't season ending because even if it's not, worst case scenario in a Tommy John surgery, it's definitely rest. It's definitely not a guy that you're going to put back out there. So there's a lot of directions we could go with this. We talked about, is this his last pitch? People made a big deal about him taking the ball off of the mound. This was an emotional moment, I think, for Dodger fans. I was glad that fans at the stadium, by the way, got up and started cheering. He was halfway off the mound before it sounded like anyone realized what was really happening. So I was glad that he got to cheer. He's sitting in the dugout we see on TV, and it kind of looked like this emotional. He's trying to figure out what moment. There's a lot you can make. Is this just an angry guy who's taking the ball because he's not thinking, sitting there because he's pissed? Is this a sad guy because he's reflecting on his career? What did you make, and where were you at during the whole Kershaw moment?
First of all, I just think you never want to see, it end like that. Even if he's back next season, like you never want to see a season end like that. We're here on October 1st. They're gearing up for another postseason run here. And Clayton Kershaw, he's as competitive as anyone in the world, honestly. And you know how bad he wants to be out there to help his team win in any sort of capacity in October. And now he's probably not going to be able to do that. It's a forearm elbow issue. He just dealt with the same thing. I believe it cost him like 2 months.
Yeah.
So it's season ending. They're going to do tests tomorrow. They haven't confirmed anything, but I would be absolutely shocked if he's on a mound again this season. There's just not enough time. And you're not going to bring him back in like a bullpen role or anything. So he's finished. And it just sucks, because obviously, like I was just saying, that's a guy you want on your roster in October. I think Tony Gonsolin is obviously going to have to step up now as that fourth starter. But just honestly, just the thought of having Clayton Kershaw as a fourth starter got me really excited about the possibilities for this October. So it just sucks that it's all gone now pretty much.
Yeah, going and looking at Matt's Twitter again, some quotes here from Kershaw. Quote, "It's a tough blow, obviously, just felt something there in my elbow, the forearm elbow. I don't know what it is, kind of the same thing I'd been dealing with. Got bad enough that I couldn't keep going." Next quote, "I know that we're going to do something special this year, and I wanted to be a part of that. That's the hardest part for me right now, is chances are it's not looking great for October." And then when asked about taking the ball off of the field, he said, quote, "Probably just shock. He had no idea he walked off with the ball. Quote, I probably should have just given it to Doc." So some information there. As you said, I mean, this is a guy who's likely done, there's no scenario where I mean, I guess there's the miracle scenario where he rests for a couple of weeks. You find yourself in the NLCS and he turns to Roberts and says, hey, put me in the bullpen and I'll give you 2 one-inning appearances at some point in this series. I mean, I wouldn't say that's a 0% chance, but the flip side of this is I don't think it's a 0% chance that he's done for a while. Like, I mean, I'm not suggesting Tommy John surgery, but who knows? I mean, like the span here is endless of what it could be. I do want to talk about Gonsolin as a 4th starter, but I mean, I think the thought on everybody's mind is what you hinted at the beginning. Is this the last time that we see Clayton Kershaw in a Dodgers uniform? As you said, unlikely to pitch this October to the rest of the season, is a free agent at the end of the year. I'll just explain I tweeted, there is a 0% chance that this is the last time that Clayton Kershaw pitches for the Dodgers. And I said that for a few reasons. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. Obviously, there is a some percent chance that he is gone. But on one hand, I can't imagine a guy like Kershaw allowing this to be the last moment that he ever pitches in Major League Baseball. Now, if he has Tommy John surgery, he has to rehab a whole year. There was a quote that Bill Plunkett tweeted out where he basically said when he feels good, he wants to keep pitching. And every time he's hurt, he wants to quit because of just how hard it is to be hurt so consistently. But a guy like Kershaw, again, I don't know him, but I can't imagine him after 14 seasons with the Dodgers allowing a 1 2/3 bad outing in which he leaves the game injured to be his last hurrah. That said, I also can't imagine him going and playing for another team. I think it was somebody on Twitter, apologies for I don't know who, but they were saying, like, is there really a team out there that Kershaw could go to and compete for a championship with that would be willing to outbid the Dodgers for Clayton Kershaw? I just don't see it. So, I mean, yes, there is theoretically, technically, a chance that he doesn't pitch for the Dodgers again, but I would be A, shocked if he doesn't pitch in Major League Baseball again, and B, shocked if somehow he were to sign for somebody else than the Dodgers. Is there any part of that there's more doubt in your mind than there seems to be in mine?
I definitely think I have a little more doubt than you, considering you're at 0%. I hear what you're saying, and I think everything you're saying makes sense. But then I also look at the list of the other Dodger free agents they have this winter, and you got names like Corey Seager, Chris Taylor, Max Scherzer, and those are all guys you want to keep. And then you look a year from now, Trey Turner's a free agent, Max Muncy's a free agent. The year after that, Walker Buehler's a free agent, and so on. You got a lot of guys that are going to command a lot of money that you're going to want to keep. And if we're being realistic, pretty much everyone I just named is probably going to contribute more in the future than Clayton Kershaw. I mean, we'll see about his injury. But he's gotten hurt a lot in recent years. He's got a lot of mileage on that arm. He's dealing with an elbow issue and doesn't have to have Tommy John. That's still a serious issue there, and something that could linger if he, like, I don't want it to be a case of a torn UCL and he has to have Tommy John, but part of me also is like, it's good to just get the surgery out of the way and then not have to worry about it as much. Cause like, if you're dealing with a forearm strain or an elbow strain or whatever, and you don't get the surgery and you just rest and rehab and you're all good, then sometimes you come back the next season or whatever in spring training, you overwork it, and then you end up needing the surgery down the line. We saw that with Corey Seager a couple years ago. He had that elbow issue. He just rehabbed it all winter, and then the next April, he blew it out and had to have Tommy John. So that's always a concern with elbow issues. So I just think, some of those other guys that are free agents are better bets to be better moving forward into the future. So I think they could be priorities over Clayton Kershaw, but at the same time, none of those guys have contributed as much to this organization as Clayton Kershaw has. Like, I don't like playing, what they are now aside, like Clayton Kershaw has given this organization more than anyone on that roster, probably in both of our lifetimes. Like, he's a franchise icon, and I think, they're going to want to keep him. I think for all the reasons you mentioned, he's going to want to stay. I don't see him wanting to go play anywhere else. It's just a matter of, can they find a number that works for both sides? And I obviously think how severe the injury is going to affect, whatever money he makes. But, I definitely hope he's back. But at the same time, I hope a lot of those other guys are back too. So I'll be curious to see kind of how they balance it all,
Yeah, I'll put you on the spot with this question, and I'll ask people in the chat to respond to this too, because I think it's an interesting one that somebody in the chat hinted at. If you had to choose between re-signing Max Scherzer or Clayton Kershaw, who would you pick?
See, to me, it's Max Scherzer, and it hurts me to say that because of how much love I have for Clayton Kershaw. But I think they're just like they're both towards the end of their career. But I think Scherzer is still he's still healthy. The velocity with him is still up. He's been the best pitcher in
Yeah.
baseball since the Dodgers got him. And while Clayton Kershaw is still good when healthy, I don't think he's still a top five pitcher in baseball the way Max Scherzer has been. So it's a tough one, but I think I'd go Max
Yeah, I
there.
mean, that's the toughest part of that question is, do you value the on the field contribution, or do you value sort of the nostalgia of Clayton Kershaw?
Right.
Because there's no question that Max Scherzer is the better pitcher and is likely to be the better pitcher over the next 2 to 3 seasons. On the flip side, I will say, because I think some Dodger fans have lost sight of this, Clayton Kershaw was really good this year when he was
Yeah.
healthy. So, yes, he was the fourth best pitcher on the team. Those other three guys are probably going to finish in the top 5 in the Cy Young voting. So, just to put that
Right.
in context, this is a guy whose ERA was hovering around 3. This is a guy who, in all reality, when he got hurt, was probably one of the top 20 to 25 pitchers in all of baseball. So, he's very good. But that's why it's interesting, because I know the baseball fan who wants to win a World Series in me, obviously Max Scherzer gives you a much better chance of that. Probably more likely to be durable as well with some of the stuff Kershaw. The flip side is, if it meant not having to watch Kershaw pitch for another team, I don't think I could bring myself to it. So I'd like to think that there's no dollar amount at which the Dodgers won't pay to keep Kershaw, and that they'll be financially irresponsible as it relates to Kershaw. I liked that AJ Ellis predicted that Clayton Kershaw would re-sign with the Dodgers, because we know that was like his best friend, probably a guy he's still
Right.
very close with. So I like that. Looking through the comments here, really interesting. I would say seemingly mostly Scherzer. Daniel, Aronetic, Vincent, all Scherzer. THP goes Kershaw. Julian, Scherzer. Derek says both. Yes, I think we all agree on that. You're cheating there, Derek. Okay, so the rules of this game, they can have both. Chase says the same thing. People don't like my question, I guess. Guillermo doesn't really like my question. Hawaiian Kira says Max. Nomo says if Kershaw is out for surgery, then sign Max. Easy choice for Robert. He says Max. Austin, Kershaw barely contributed. Austin, I'd encourage you, go look at his statistics this season. Yes, it was not a full season, but when he was healthy, he was very good. Obviously, I guess nights like tonight will not help those statistics. But yeah, who knows? It's just a fascinating question. And as you said, there's going to be days coming. Okay, I know everybody wants to talk about what are the Dodgers going to do. Look, the season is not over yet. Daniel and I are going to be desperate for content once this thing ends. Okay, so
Yeah.
give us like a week or two after the season ends, and we would love to have 45-minute conversations about Trey Turner versus Corey Seager and Chris Taylor and the whole deal. Okay, but on the Kershaw point, the one other thing I wanted to make shifting is I do think from a playoff moving forward perspective, I guess my headline, I don't think this is a hot take, would be nothing that happened tonight changes my view of the Dodgers as a World Series competitor. And I think that's because I'm high on Tony Gonsolin. I know he hasn't been perfect. I think he's been pretty good. I think historically he's been really good. And while Kershaw is better, I just think the gap between those two as your number 4 starter isn't dramatic enough for me to say, oh my gosh. In some ways, you could even make the argument that the way Dave Roberts has a propensity to throw Kershaw in the bullpen and put him in uncomfortable situations, that not having him available in some spots might actually be an advantage for the Dodgers, because Roberts isn't going to go to try and get 7 outs from Kershaw 2 days after he starts or something like that. So I don't know if I'm crazy on that one, but I do feel like at least for now, we were at a moment where it was like, who's going to start for the Dodgers? I like that they have Gonsolin. Again, even David Price is your 5th starter. Not a guy who's been amazing, but who I trust in the postseason. So I do think from a starting rotation perspective and how often a number 4 starter would be used, I think the Dodgers will be okay. I guess the counter to all of that, not to take words out of your mouth if you were going to make this argument, is that it does limit what Julio Urias's role can be in the postseason, because now he's your number 3 starter and you can't be really screwing with him in the bullpen, knowing that he has to make you another start later in the series or in the next series or whatnot. But what do you make of the drop from Kershaw to Gonsolin, how this impacts Urias, David Price, etc.?
Yeah, I think you're right that it's not a huge drop given the current Kershaw that we're
Yeah,
getting.
that's a
Like,
great point.
coming off injury, not fully built up, like looked good in a couple starts, but also looked bad in a couple starts. Clearly didn't look as good as he looked earlier in the year when he was healthy. Like, I think if we were getting, May and June Kershaw when he was throwing the ball really well, Obviously, that would be a pretty significant drop off. But the current version of Kershaw we're getting, I agree, it's not a huge drop off to Gonsolin. I'd say the only thing with Gonsolin is you probably can't really count on him to go very deep into games, which is fine for your fourth starter. You're probably only going to get 4, maybe 5 innings out of him, like if everything goes well. But at the end of the day, like you said, they still got their top 3 guys that are all really good, and they're all really dependable. And their bullpen's still really good. Like you mentioned, David Price, he's probably now becomes the long man, which would have been Gonsolin.
Yeah.
But I think that's a pretty adequate role for David Price, and the way that a lot of other guys are throwing the ball. You already talked about the bullpen and some of these unsung hero type guys like Justin Brule and Evan Phillips. Those are probably back of the roster type postseason guys potentially.
Yeah.
And they're looking pretty good. And obviously, the high leverage guys have looked great. So I think the overall state of the pitching staff is still pretty solid. You'd rather have Kershaw than not have him, but all things considered, I agree that it's not like a huge drop off.
Yeah, and what Julio did as a reliever last postseason will live on in Dodger lore forever, right? But I will say that there were moments in there where I felt like there was maybe some batted ball luck that he benefited from. And so even with the state of the Dodger bullpen, maybe this is blasphemous for me to say as a Dodger fan, but there's just other guys that I'm perfectly content with coming into big spots in the Dodger bullpen, to the point where I don't feel like there's this huge hole at the back of the Dodger bullpen. Like, oh my gosh, if we take Julio out of that role, then what are we going to do? It's like, I trust Jansen more than him as a reliever. I trust Trinan more than him as a reliever. And honestly, I think Julio's probably in the same category as a guy like Knebel or a guy like Joe Kelly, if we're being honest. For me, personally, I don't know if everybody else agrees. I think there is this sort of mythology around Julio as a reliever. But I do feel like this makes things simple. Everybody knows their role. The Dodgers don't have to try and get too crazy with moving guys in and out of positions. All of this to say, none of this really matters unless the Dodgers can win a wild card game on Wednesday. The Giants won again tonight, 3-0 over the Padres. The Padres get 9 hits. They score 0 runs. If you watch some of the highlights of that game, it was like bloop singles to score runs. Then there was the play where the single go down the line, hits the bag, pops right to the third baseman. Tatis is caught in no man's land, and instead of bases loaded or even a run in, the Padres get nothing. This a night after the Diamondbacks had 25 left on base against the Giants last night. And I think did I see the Diamondbacks went and scored like 7 runs or something tonight? So of course they did, right? The Dodgers now need to win both of their games, while the Giants would have to lose both of their games for us not to avoid a wild card. As we shift gears from the Kershaw topic, then we'll get to player of the game, and then we'll get to some questions after this. How are you approaching these last two? As long as the division is theoretically in reach, are you full send, start all your guys, etc.? I mean, because there were some worrisome moments where Trey Turner puts a tag down and gets smashed. His hand gets smashed by cleats into the bag. Then the very next inning, Corey Seager steps on the pitcher's foot and looks like he rolls his ankle. Mookie Betts gets hit by a pitch later in the game. There were a couple moments of just clear discomfort from Dodger players. So how would you approach these next 2 games if you were Dave Roberts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good thing that the Dodgers have going for them is at least the Giants play a day game tomorrow and the Dodgers play a night game. So they'll know how that game goes. And if the Giants win that game, it's over. So then if the Giants win that game, you could start resting guys. Julio's supposed to pitch. He's going for 20 wins. But you probably cap him at 5 innings there, and if it doesn't go well and he doesn't have a chance at getting a win, you can make that even much shorter if you want, or you could do that regardless. I know 20 wins is important to some guys, but I know every single guy would take a World Series over that. So I think he would understand if maybe he only pitches 2 or 3 innings or whatever, just in case. The wild card game's Wednesday. You said that's a winner-take-all game. You might need Julio out of the bullpen in that game, so you definitely don't want to throw him 100 pitches on Saturday and then he's not available for that game. And then it's kind of the same thing for Sunday. If it's over, Walker Buehler is scheduled to pitch that game. Maybe he has a shortened outing. Maybe he doesn't throw at all. Who knows? I will say, though, we did get some news before the game today. Dave Roberts basically confirmed what we already knew, but it's that Max Scherzer will be starting, whether it's game 163 or the wild card game. It'll be Max Scherzer. We knew that was going to be the case, but we also kind of talked the other day about how Buehler threw well the other day. Scherzer has had 2 bad starts in a row. Do you make the switch now? You could easily hold Buehler out of the Sunday start. But I agree with the move to go with Scherzer there. I think he's been the best guy since he came over to the Dodgers. So yeah, I guess you just got to wait and see what happens with the Giants tomorrow, because if they win, it's over. If they lose, you still have a chance, and you still got to go for it at that point.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I heard them mention that at the end of the broadcast and wasn't positive, but that is huge for the Dodgers to be able to see what the Giants do before playing tomorrow, because it is an entire game that they can rest. Now, obviously, with the 26-man or 28-man roster, I mean, there's only so much you could do. Matt Beatty would get a lot of time in the outfield. Gavin Lux would probably get some reps in center field.
Get Cody out there, probably.
Yeah, some Cody Bellinger. Those. I mean, you obviously just take out Mookie Betts. Probably, hopefully, doesn't play in that game. But at some point, you have to be able to field. I mean, it's not like you have an unlimited roster, so they do have to put some of these guys out there. I'm sure Will Smith will be catching all of those games, just to spite me. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, because I'm with you. It's interesting tomorrow, the Julio piece, going for win number 20, being in Cy Young contention. Obviously, the Brewers, you can see what a team who has clinched already is doing. Corbin Burns is scheduled to start for them tomorrow, regardless. So some teams probably want to keep guys on some sort of a rhythm. They don't want, Julio to, for example, to take like 8 or 9 or 10 days off in between starts, especially if you can go for 20 wins. Like you said, cap him around 5. I mean, the pitch count's the most important number. See if you can get him win number 20, and if not, for you, with Buehler is where it's a little bit different, because once you get to the Buehler start, then it's a matter of, well, if you don't use Buehler in that game, he could be coming back and pitching in a situation that would require him to mess up his rest a little bit. So would you start Buehler no matter what on Sunday, or if the division was wrapped up, would you let him rest? Because game 1 of the NLDS would be what? Would that be Friday night?
Yeah.
So I guess Friday. It would be on normal rest for him to pitch Sunday and then Friday. How would you handle that if with Buehler, who doesn't have a 20th win in front of him? Obviously he's in the thick of Cy Young contention, but there's not really a statistic that he could move the needle dramatically over what he's already accomplished.
Yeah. I think you start him and just have it be a shortened start, maybe 3 innings or so. Like you said, you don't want to have 8 days off, whatever. Then you start to get a little rusty. So I think you go out there for a few innings just to stay sharp, and then you could still make it a shortened outing, and then you're feeling fresh going into game 1. Dave Roberts said it's highly unlikely that Walker Buehler would pitch out of the bullpen in a wild card game, and I agree with that. He's been a starter his whole life pretty much. He's not really accustomed to that bullpen role, and I don't think in a one-game winner take all you're going to start experimenting with new roles, especially when you're going to have someone that's going to need to start game 1 if you win the wild card game. So why would you want to burn Buehler there? So I think he still starts Sunday, goes 2 or 3 innings, and then he's ready to go for game 1.
Yeah, we're going to get to some questions here in just a moment, as well as player of the game, so feel free to start throwing those into the chat. I'll throw one interesting scenario at you. There is a world in which the Dodgers play game 163 against the Giants and then played a wild card game after that. The wild card game starter would likely be Tony Gonsolin. So we had talked about that being Clayton Kershaw, but that would now be Tony Gonsolin, because Urias and Buehler would be burned on Saturday and Sunday and would not be ready for a Wednesday turnaround. Especially Urias, right? Like Urias, of all the guys who's pitched all these innings, you probably won't want to pitch him on short rest. So it's just a fascinating wrinkle. The odds of that happening are unlikely, but if the Dodgers got to a wild card game where it was Gonsolin versus Wainwright, I imagine blood pressure in the Los Angeles area would be higher than expected. So let's go to
you're right.
let's go to player of the game. I joked with you on Twitter that I'm going to call dibs on probably the most obvious name, although to your credit, you kind of got a late submission there to a guy that probably belongs in the conversation. I'll go with Trey Turner. There's not enough that I could say about how impressed I have been with this guy. He finishes 2 for 3 with 2 runs, 5 RBIs, a walk. Of course, both hits were home runs. The first one looked a little fortunate. Looked like he was almost just trying to fight off a high fastball. Somehow kept it inside the right field pole. He gets a home run there, and then obviously comes up in the biggest moment, hits a grand slam. The most emotion I've seen out of Trey Turner as he's rounding first base, which that was exciting to see. This is a guy who's going to lead baseball in batting average. He's hitting .327. He's got a .531 slugging percentage. He's been fantastic on defense. Just to see the way that he is peaking, he has a very outside chance at 30-30. I think if he hit 3 home runs in the next 2 days, he would get to 30-30. But Trey Turner, to me, I mean, the Grand Slam alone is a memorable moment in a season of memorable moments. So for me, the player of the game would be Trey Turner.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. Since you called dibs on him for a while, for me, I was gonna go with Alex Vesia's
Yeah,
mustache. That was just looking
10 out
glorious
of
out
10.
there. He pitched well. But then Matt Beatty just had to upstage, the stash and goes deep for the game-winning homer on a 97-mile-an-hour pitch. So I'm gonna have to go with Matt Beatty there. We already talked about him at length, so I don't need to go into detail. But that was a great swing, and it was a big, that gave the Dodgers the lead for good. So that was a game winner right there. I also want to give a little honorable mention to Kenley Jansen. Comes in, gets a 4-out save. His stuff's been looking really good as of late. And he's been locating well. He's been walking fewer guys compared to earlier in the season, and the numbers reflect how he's looked. He's been lights out for a while now. So I think this is the best Kenley has looked,
Yeah.
going into a postseason in, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Like, it's been a while. He usually kind of limps into the postseason. So that's good to see. Definitely helps ease the nerves a little bit when you got a guy who could come in and strike guys out and is going to pound the zone and get outs, which is what you need back there.
Yeah.
So honorable mention Kenley Jansen, but Matt Beatty is my player of the
Yeah,
game.
I'm just looking at the stats, by the way. Blake Treinen's season ERA dipped below 2 tonight, so he's down to 1.99. On the Jansen note, what did you think about the decision to bring him in for a 4-out save in this game? Obviously, it was a 2-run game. At first, I was like, okay, what are we doing? Like, in a situation like this, are we really going to put stress? And then on one hand, I thought maybe there's almost in the same way you stretch out starters, put a guy in an uncomfortable situation to see how he responds. We know that come postseason time, this is the type of scenario Dave Roberts is quick to go to, is the Treinen, get the outs in the 7th inning and come back out for the 8th. The Kenley Jansen 5-out saves. Did that make sense to you? Did you have any issue with the going to Kenley in a situation like this for 4 outs?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by it like you at first, but it makes some sense. Like you said, it's kind of like a little test to see if he could do it. Him and Trina have been pitching a lot lately, so hopefully, they don't have to pitch on, Saturday or I'd say they're probably down tomorrow, but then maybe they'll pitch Sunday, but it'll depend on, how the standings are shaking out or whatever. But, it's good to see that he went in there
Yeah.
and got the job done because that was, kind of something he hasn't done a whole lot this year. I feel like he's mostly just been a 9th inning guy. We obviously know in the postseason, they, like you just said, Dave Roberts, he's a little more liberal. He's going to his guys a lot quicker. So it was good to see that, he came through tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, if you've got questions that you want to discuss tonight, throw those in the chat. I see some people just joining us, so I'll recap a couple of the things we've just touched on. The Clayton Kershaw update, which a few people have asked about, is that Dave Roberts said he could tell that Kershaw was in some pain. He came to get him. Kershaw said it's the same situation that he was feeling earlier, the left forearm/elbow. He speculated that he's likely out for the month of October. I'm assuming he means likely for the rest of the season. There were people on Twitter making a big deal about him grabbing the ball. He kind of brushed that away and said, I didn't even realize I did it. I should have just given the ball to Dave Roberts. That was kind of my impression. Now, he could be lying. He might have intentionally done that and doesn't want to make a big deal of it. My thought was he just seemed so pissed that, he wasn't even thinking about what he was doing, but that was one of it. That was one of the headlines. The other thing, obviously, the big win, and we mentioned it at the top, 104 wins for the Dodgers. This ties the second most wins in Los Angeles Dodgers history. You'd have to go back to 1953 to find the next time. So 2019 is the record at 106 wins. 2017, 104 wins. They've tied that with 2 games to go. So it's pretty crazy to think that a team most Dodgers seem to think is a disappointment is very I shouldn't say likely. It's very possible that they're going to tie the Los Angeles Dodgers record for wins in a season. I'd have to go back and look. Obviously, 53, they had 105 wins. So it would be the most dating back past 1953. I don't know if they've ever had more than that, but a pretty crazy situation there for the Dodgers and just a highlighting of how good they've been. Of course, doesn't matter because the Giants keep winning and nothing's gained. So let's go to the chat here and see if we've got any questions. Let's see. I'll scroll back a little bit. We got some people saying that glad Jace Tinkler's not our manager. I think that's a safe bet that we all agree on. The Athletic had a great piece. I think it was Ken Rosenthal breaking down sort of the behind-the-scenes stuff in the Padres, and oh my goodness, that is a disaster. So I'll say this. You and I have been critical of Dave Roberts at times. I think you watch. I was thinking this today as I read this. watching what happened to the Padres and the fact that Dave Roberts has never allowed that to happen, that the Dodgers have never imploded, that even seasons that people have been disappointed in, like ultimately Dave Roberts has pulled out division titles. He's pulled out deep postseason runs, even in the midst of quote disappointments and whatnot, I think is a credit to Roberts. And I think while there might be individual moments that Roberts gets crushed for and criticized for, whether it's pitching decisions or bullpen decisions or double switches or whatever it might be, the one thing I'll say is you have to zoom out to kind of appreciate Dave Roberts. And it's recognizing that you look at the Padres are loaded. I know they've dealt with injuries. Lots of teams have dealt with injuries. The Padres' talent, there's no excuse for being a below 500 team, which is what they're likely to finish as this season, I believe. And so I think that's what I appreciate most about Roberts is the consistency. I'm not defending the individual decisions, but I'm just saying, like, there's something to, he's one of those coaches that you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone. It's like the college football situation where teams get sick of a guy who's winning 9 or 10 games every season because they want to win 12. And then they fire the 9 or 10 win guy. And all of a sudden it's Clay Helton there and you've got 6 or 7 wins and it's a complete disaster. So like, I think it's that sort of thing. And so I guess as much as I crush Dave Roberts, and I'm not saying it's not without reason, I've never lost the big picture sight of Dave Roberts as what he does sort of for the team in the long run. I don't know if that makes sense, but does that resonate with you? I mean, if you followed any of this Jace Tingler stuff, it's just made me appreciate Dave Roberts even more.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like the knock on Roberts has always been about, in-game decisions. Like you said, whether it's a bullpen, pinch hitting, whatever the case may be, that's the knock on Roberts. I think even his biggest critics would have to agree. Like he really knows how to manage a clubhouse. He's a really positive, upbeat guy. Always, literally always positive, even to a fault. I think that's what Dodger fans get mad at in some of his press conferences when things are going bad, that he remains too positive. But that's what a good manager does. And I think there's something to be said about the way he's able to get guys to buy in and take lesser roles, like guys who would be everyday players on other teams, but because the Dodgers have so many good players and so much depth, maybe they're playing less here. And you don't hear a single complaint out of any guy ever. So I definitely think there's something to be said about that. And I know we're probably going to be sitting here in less than a week's time and complaining about some in-game decision that Dave Roberts makes that costs them playoff game. Hopefully it doesn't cost them the wild card game, but it's probably going to cost them a game this October. Let's just be honest here. But with that being said, I think you kind of hit it on the head that we could both still appreciate the bigger picture. Like you said, like there's a lot of times where things could go wrong. And if you don't have a manager that can handle it, things go south real quick. And that's what we saw with the Padres this year. And like you said, we haven't seen that with Dave Roberts. They've won the division every single year he's been manager. This year is going to be the first year they're not gonna, but you just said they might not. Might not. They're not gonna, but like you just said, this is they're probably gonna tie the Los Angeles Dodgers win record. So that's no fault of their own if they don't win the division. So yeah, I definitely appreciate Dave Roberts, even with his weaknesses.
Yeah, I reserve the right, by the way, to delete everything I just said if Austin Barnes starts in a one-game wildcard game, okay? Jason Austin asked, any scenario, this will be a quick one, any scenario Kenley Jansen is back with the Dodgers next year?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, he's pitched really well. He's probably going to get paid a lot, so I'd say that if he doesn't, it's probably just because they get outbid, not because they don't want him back. Like, as much as fans may not like Kenley Jansen, I feel like the organization has stayed behind him this whole time. Dave Roberts has never wavered on that he's the closer. And I still think Kenley's got some good years left. Like, it's not like he's 40 years old. Like, he's, I think, like 32 or something. So I definitely think it's possible. I'd say it's probably not likely just because they have other options. Like, you could easily just make Blake Treinen your closer, and not pay Kenley Jansen $15 million a year or whatever it's going to cost, especially since you have so many other free agents that you're going to have to pay. But I definitely think it's possible. I don't think it's likely.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Where you landed that one is I would not say likely. I would say of all the guys who are free agents, he will literally be last on my list of the most likely guys. As good as he's been this year, I feel like this is going to be one of those things where it's like, hey, you know what? We're just glad this last year was as good as it was, because I think it less of like, oh my gosh, we've changed our mind on him. I think there was some real road bumps. speed bumps a year ago with the playoffs and kind of his reaction to some of that stuff. And so I think this is more of like, thank goodness we didn't have to have a conversation about what would happen if we took him out of the closer role and move on. I mean, the Dodgers historically have not really paid relievers. Blake Trinan is basically as close as you can get to the exception to that rule. He's been fantastic, but Trinan is under contract next year. I believe Joe Kelly has one more year on his contract. And then you've got guys.
No, this is Kelly's last year too.
So they mentioned like Caleb Ferguson coming back next year. Obviously, Tommy Kahnle. Knable will be a free agent as well. So I just think there's directions you could go in the bullpen that would be more affordable. And yes, at some point dollars matter. And if you're looking at Kershaw, Scherzer, Seager, Taylor, if you've been following some of the AJ Pollock stuff, they kind of have lucked out a little bit with his contract situation. He's going to come up like 6 at-bats short of being eligible for like a $5 million buyout and then free agency. But I would imagine it's possible that he could get a contract extension there as well. So I would be shocked if Kenley Jansen's back with the Dodgers next year. I just think the cost is going to be too high. I don't think he necessarily would love to be back based on some of the stuff he's had to navigate. I don't think the Dodgers would be shedding a ton of tears if he's gone. I think they would just go elsewhere in the bullpen and trust elsewhere. So Don Kim asks, looking at the Giants, obviously the news that Brandon Belt's going to be out a while. He asked, does the Giants offense take a dip with Brandon Belt out? If I'm asking this question and thinking a little bit differently, does your perception of the Giants change at all without Brandon Belt in the middle of that lineup?
I mean, I would say yes, just because you look at his numbers and he's been outstanding. Like, he's been their best hitter when he's been in there. But with that being said, like, the Giants, like, he's gone down, and I don't think the Giants have lost since then. They keep finding ways. They keep finding guys who, you've never heard of or whatever, who come out and perform, all the same. So I definitely look at them a little less, but at the same time, it's not like that's like a backbreaker as we've seen over the last week or so.
Yeah, absolutely. It's same boat for me. I mean, it's just like, again, I think I said this last time. I've just stopped assuming that the Giants, like, there's any logic to what they're doing over there. Yeah, I mean, yes, it would make sense for a guy like him to be gone and for them to stop scoring runs as much as they have been. But it also would make sense for Lamont Wade not to be good, and for Darren Ruff not to be good, and for Mike Yastrzemski to not be good. Like, all of these guys are very average Major League Baseball players that they have somehow developed into studs. So, yeah, I don't know. Do what you will with that. One note I want to make. I mean, some people talking about Kershaw on here. Go back to the outing right before he got injured. So his last healthy outing was June 27th. That was 8 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned, 13 strikeouts against the Cubs. He finished that game with a 3.25 ERA, one of the best whips in all of baseball, and his strikeout numbers were healthy. So I just see people in the chat saying Kershaw wasn't helpful this year. Like, just statistically, it doesn't add up. Yes, he got hurt a couple times, and in both of those starts, the ERA is going to balloon a little bit. But to be basically 3/4 of the way through a season, half the way through a season, and have a 3.25 ERA with again, I mean, I think literally he was like a top 7 walks and hits per inning pitch in all of baseball. I don't know. I just don't. Yes, he wasn't as good as Buehler and Scherzer or even Julio this season. But again, those guys are all going to finish in the top 5 or 6 in the Cy Young Award winner. So there you go. Ryan W. asks, we kind of touched on this a little bit. Someone asked who would be the Sunday starter if they're still in contention. That answer would be Buehler. Ryan W. asks, Julio, bullpen or starter or both? We touched on this. I mean, do you even consider using him as both now that Kershaw is hurt, or is he full-time starter and just riding it out with him there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you got to go by, what's happening in front of you. Like, obviously, he's going to be a starter. He's going to make a start. But if there's a game where it's like a game 5 of the NLDS, winner take all, he's on 2 days rest or whatever. So that's kind of his bullpen day or whatever. Your bullpen's kind of taxed because you're in game 5 at this point. It's a close run game, and you need someone to close out the series. Then I think you go to him. But I don't think you could use him as liberally as you would have when Clayton Kershaw was the other starter, just because you're not counting on Gonsolin to give you a ton of length in his starts. And, if you could get Julio 2 starts in a series, I definitely think you'd want to do that, considering how good he is. So I'm not going to rule anything out just because situations get crazy. It's October baseball. You never know what you're going to need at what point. But with that being said, I think it'll be kind of less than last year. I think it's going to be more, he's going to be more of just a starter this time around. But if there's a big spot, I would definitely go to him, and I hope they don't hesitate to go to him there.
Yeah, Derek Wing with a question here. If we were to get into game 163 and lose it, and you faced with the scenario I mentioned where Tony Gonsolin would be the probable starter for that wild card game, Derek asks, would you rather have a bullpen game or Gonsolin starting? Now, there's obviously an in-between scenario there where Gonsolin just pitches a couple of innings, but if you had to choose between sort of handing Gonsolin the ball and hoping to get 4 innings out of him, or just going straight bullpen game and throwing Kenley, Trinan, Kelly, just go down the list of 7 or 8 of your best relievers out there and see what happens, which would you prefer?
Yeah, I'm starting Gonsolin in that game. But with that being said, like you just said, the leash is very short. It's a winner take all game. If it's the second inning and the bases are loaded with 1 out and Gonsolin has walked 2 guys or whatever, or he's getting hit hard and he clearly doesn't have it, I'm not hesitating to make a move right there. Like you could use every reliever you have to get through that game. You'll be okay. You're not going to run out of pitching, but you can't really afford to fall in like a 3-0, 4-0 hole in a game like that. So I think you start Gonsolin and you hope he could give you 4 or 5 solid innings, like you said. But you got to have a short leash, kind of similar to what we saw from Gonsolin in the postseason last year, right? Like he started some games, but he definitely did not look good, and they got him out of quickly.
I still, every time I see a highlight of the Arozarena home run that he hits off Gonsolin, every time I watch it, I have no clue how that ball gets out. I mean, it is a good pitch on the outside of the zone, and he is full extension. It looks like a blooper, and somehow it clears it. It's one of the most ridiculous things ever. So I'm a Gonsolin defender. I'm biased when I watch that clip, but I just laugh every time because I'm like, he got pulled out of the game because of this crap. Like, he had to have felt so good when that pitch left his hand and so good when that ball hit that bat, but who knows? Not a question here, but a couple people mentioning, do you want to make a comment about the Padres being 78 and 82, 4 games under 500 with 2 to go, and now 28 games back of the division, 26 games back of the Giants? Do you have any thoughts on any of that, Daniel?
I just want to know if the people asking that are the same Padre fans that came in our show from time to time when the Padres were winning the April World Series and sweeping us, and Tatis is hitting homers left and right. They were talking a lot then. I haven't seen them a whole lot on Twitter since then. I guess they came out for a second the other night to celebrate Tatis hitting one out of the stadium, which I will say that was pretty cool. He destroyed that ball. But that's really the only thing they've had to cheer about in a month or so. So I guess I'm happy for them that they got to enjoy their April World Series. I hope they hung a banner for that, but that was the highlight of their season right there, because it's been all downhill ever since. And now, like you mentioned, that athletic piece from this morning, they got a lot of interesting decisions to make. So I'll be curious to see what they do this winter. They no longer have the farm system that they used to have. They can't go out and trade for a brand new team again the way they have the last couple years. So I'll be curious to see how it all plays out for them. But with that being said, I think now we could kind of focus on teams that are going to be playing in this October, not ones that are going to be done in a couple days.
Perfect segue there. Doug asks, Adam Wainwright been named the wild card starter for the Cardinals, likely who the Dodgers will end up seeing on Wednesday, likely where the Dodgers end up on Wednesday. He asks, Adam Wainwright, how has he been pitching his last few starts? If you want some encouragement, I would say the last 4 starts have been a far worse stretch for him than maybe the 10 or so before that. He did face the Dodgers back on September 8th, did give up 4 earned runs. He did go 8 1/3, so kind of a misleading game because a bunch of those runs came in the 9th inning, but only 4 strikeouts. He's not a big strikeout pitcher. He had a good start against the Mets after that, and then since then, he's given up 9 earned runs in his last 3 outings, and those 3 have only lasted 16 innings. So that was 2 runs to the Brewers, 5 runs to the Brewers, and 2 runs to the Padres. Over that stretch, just 7 strikeouts as well. So the Dodgers just saw him. They did eventually get to him, but he is another guy that's going to finish in the top 5 or 6 in the Cy Young Award winning, the Cy Young results. Gosh, I can't speak. It's late at night. This game, freaking 4-hour game, and we got to do a post game show. Here I am. Yeah, 11:50 p.m. I guess all things considered, I'm doing okay. A couple more here. Abe, will Jeff ever come back to being pro Austin Barnes?
When the DH comes back, maybe.
Yeah. No, the Justin Turner needs to be DH. I am less anti Austin Barnes and more pro Will Smith. I just want to be on the record for that. Although as I say that out loud, I don't think Austin Barnes is very good. Like, I think he's terrible offensively, and I think he's solid defensively. So I don't know. I guess the answer, I just answered your question there without really answering it there. Okay.
Yeah, the answer was no there.
Yeah. Yeah. Derek asks, man, we got a lot of Jeff Austin Barnes questions. Would I wear an Austin Barnes jersey if he hit a game-winning home run in the wild card game? Yeah, pencil me in. If the Dodgers play in the wild card and Austin Barnes hits a game-winning home run, and if somehow I procure an Austin Barnes jersey without having to pay like $160 to customize it, you better believe it. I'll wear it for like the rest. I'll hang an Austin Barnes jersey behind me, okay? I don't know. I don't know what we'll take down back here. Probably not Vin and probably not the World Series championship one there. But we'll find a way, okay? I'll throw that out there. Austin Barnes hits a game-winning home run in the wild card game. I'll throw his jersey on the wall behind me. How's that? I got to find an Austin. Again, I'm not paying $160 for an Austin Barnes jersey either. So we'll see what kind of happens.
You get that t-shirt version.
Yeah, maybe we'll get a jersey. Austin. Do they even sell Austin Barnes jerseys though?
I have no idea.
Okay, Christian asks a good question. Do you think playing important games this late in the season helps with postseason success? Do you think the fact that the Dodgers are in playoff contention right now helps? I would just say the fact that we've seen them come back from 4-run deficits twice in the last few days is the most life we've seen out of them. So I don't know if maybe that doesn't happen if these games don't matter, but I do feel like the Dodgers are peaking, whether that has to do with being in a playoff race or not. I do feel like the Dodgers are primed for the postseason, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to add on, like I think these guys understand like what's at stake once the playoff starts. Like these guys have been through it so many times. They understand what's at stake. They're going to be prepared. They're going to be ready to go. Like we saw, I think it was 2017 that year when they lost like 16 out of 17 in September or whatever. They had a 1,000,000-game lead on the division. They weren't playing any important games. But then once the playoffs started, they still showed up and swept the Diamondbacks. So I think these guys understand what's at stake when those lights are on, and they'll be ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, a couple more questions here. I realized I was way behind in the chat, so apology situation. Let's see. Some Machado questions. Oh, here's a good one. Ryan W., do you trust Gratterall in the playoffs? That's an easy no for me. Where are you at on Gratterall?
No, I mean, we saw it the last 2 nights. He's been getting hit around. And the thing is, like, they got so many other options and guys that have been pitching well. You kind of got to go with the hot hand at this point. Like, Gratterall, I don't want to say it's been a lost season, but he struggled from the get-go. I think there was one kind of stretch in there, like maybe in late July or August, where he started throwing the ball kind of well, but he hasn't been lately. So I definitely wouldn't trust him in any leverage, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he's left off the roster altogether. And I'll have to, and I'll do this before Sunday show. Like we'll probably like talk roster and stuff, so I'll go and look and count the spots and see what's what. But he's either the last guy on the roster or not on it at all for me.
Yeah. I mean, Evan Phillips, like I would trust Evan Phillips more than Gratterall, right?
Right.
I mean, and that's a guy who like you would assume was not on the roster a little while ago.
Right.
But again, as you said, we'll get down to that. There's some people asking about the commentators. Obviously, Joe Davis is coming back to the booth tomorrow. Oral Hershiser, thoughts and prayers with him because he tested positive for COVID. So he is out, I think they said, at least through the NLDS. Or maybe he would come back in time for the NLDS, but he's out for a while is the moral of the story there. So, hopefully that works itself out. I mean, I don't know. I've never been the biggest fan of when they substitute some of these guys in. I thought the crew has done okay the last few nights. I mean, we're not trying to be overly negative here, but I thought they've done fine. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if you want to comment at all on some of the home run calls have been really good, and I thought some of the other ones felt a little forced. I'll leave it at that.
I thought the Apollo 11 one last night was good. I'll say that.
See, that's the one I didn't like. That's the one I was like, oh man.
You didn't like that one? I thought that was a good
That was in the 1+4, and then he brought it back. I was like, I don't know. It just feels like I'm the guy that forces it. Like, right? Like I'm so mad that Bell Dinger hasn't caught on. That feels like it makes sense to me. So maybe I got to go easy on other people. Yeah. Okay, so let's see if we got one more question. Somebody's asking about wild card game. Scherzer's going to be the starter. I think you said so. Robert's officially announced that Scherzer would either start 163 or the wild card game.
Yeah.
Which I mean, it's not breaking news there. I guess aside from if Walker Buehler somehow doesn't start on Sunday. Man, some Ohtani to the Dodgers talking here, Daniel. You're missing out on some of that.
I'd love that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay. I think some people are talking about in the playoffs having to listen to like the TBS crew. Maybe that was what the question was talking about, and praying that we don't get Joe Buck and that crew. So yeah. Okay, I guess that's kind of
I
it.
mean, if it's Dodgers Giants, that's going to be the it series of the NLDS right there. I mean, the two best teams in baseball. So whoever, I don't know if the NL is TBS or Fox this year, but if it is Fox, we will definitely be getting Joe Buck. I think we had him last year. So I think the NL is TBS this year because I remember Joe Buck was calling the NL games last year. So I think I don't even know who the TBS guys are, but we get a year off from Buck until the World Series.
As long as it's not A-Rod, we'll be good. We'll be good on that one.
It might be for the wild card game. I'll have to look what.
Yeah, I do think. Well, no, I think it is the wild card game's on TBS, and they announced the time for that. I believe it's 5:40 or 5:20, something like that. So all that was announced, and I just remember thinking like, "Oh, TBS, that's weird." It's people are saying Joe Buck's not that bad. I mean, when you get 7 straight games of him calling the Dodgers and Braves with like John Smoltz, who is a Braves legend, I mean that got a little old pretty quick. So definitely by game, even if it wasn't quick, by game 4, game 5, it was definitely old. So there we go. Julian, you get the last question of the night. This is an easy one. Do you think the MLB should have kept the wild card series instead of bringing back the 1-game wild card? All I'm saying is the Dodgers are going to finish like 14 games better than the Cardinals, and their 1 game is going to be between them. So we can talk about this another time. Maybe this will be a conversation for Sunday or even after the season. I think it just needs to be something where the team with the better record has a much bigger advantage than even the 3-game series. It should be you have to lose twice in a row. My crazy theory, which I think I was told, maybe Joel Sherman, someone from the New York Post had posted a similar idea before me. I didn't steal it, but I'll give them credit, was that for every 5 games you are ahead of the other team in the standings, you should get an automatic victory in a 5-game series or in a 3-game series. So like if wildcard 1 is 10 games better than wildcard 2, there should be no series. It's just you automatically advanced. If it's 9 games, then it's 2-1. And if they're tied, then you just play a best of 3 or something. So I have crazy ideas for the wild card, but the short version is the current system is absolute crap and a complete crock and an embarrassment, honestly. For 14 games gap between these two teams to come down to playing 1 game is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think the simple solution is just the second wildcard team has to beat the first wildcard team twice, and the first wildcard team only has to win once. That allows you to gives you that 1-game buffer where we talk about how anything could happen in 1 game. Well, you know, if anything does happen and you lose, then you get another chance. And it also makes you more want to go for that first wild card spot more because I think that's a pretty significant advantage right there. Not only do you get to host the game, but you also get 2 chances at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. Well, hey, folks, we appreciate you joining us. We had great chat. Those joining us on YouTube and on Facebook, we appreciate you as always. Make sure you ring the notification bell, subscribe here. Daniel, myself, Matt Moreno will all be back Sunday night, not immediately following post game, but probably like 8 p.m. on Sunday. So set a note on your calendar for that one. Unlikely we will be doing a post game show. I might come solo tomorrow if something crazy happens. If the Dodgers do get to within a 1 game and there is dramatics, I might be here tomorrow night doing it solo. So we'll stay tuned. We'll watch that one together and see what happens. But Daniel, Matt, and I will be here Sunday. Justin Lorber and myself will be here on Monday doing a little bit of a breakdown, a preview of whatever we've got ahead of us, most likely the wild card game. And then we'll be here Wednesday night, obviously, watching the wild card game, and then we'll have a live post game for that one as well. So we appreciate you joining us. The Dodgers win 8-6. Again, the headline, Clayton Kershaw injured, likely to be out for the rest of the season. His future as a Dodger to be determined. But the good news is the Dodgers win, even though the Giants win. They're 2 games back with 2 games to go, and we'll see what happens. That's Daniel. I'm Jeff. Check out DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 everywhere on social media. And while we can still say it, I'm just going to keep saying it. Still champs.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball.